We probably ought to be praying for my secretary, Sherry Perry, because she has been with her husband for 3 days now. And that's the most time she spent with him alone in God knows how long. But they are celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary. And how Bob put up with her for 40 years, I'll never know. Or vice versa, exactly. More likely, vice versa. Of course, Bob taught last week. It's always hard to follow Bob when he teaches. It sounded like Kitty and I were in San Antonio for my sister who lives there, surprise, 50th wedding anniversary. And that's the one whose daughter died of cancer, and also the one whose, while the daughter had cancer, husband had a stroke, and he's been in the wheelchair for all of this time. But their belief is strong. They're getting tired, like I think we all are to an extent, but they can lean on God to get them through it. And it was a great time. And today we're going to talk about not so great a time, but yet a time that our God had determined was appropriate. As human beings, I think we look at today's lesson with frustration, just trying to accept the fact that we live in a world that is so sinful that the only way we have any chance of being deemed righteous was for Jesus to die, and to die a horrible death. This needs to go up. Thank you. Or do I need to stand taller? Kenny's telling me, is that it? My voice is a little, yes, it does, didn't it? My voice is a little bad today. I was telling Buzz, Kitty and I decided, well, because a guy was at our place, decided to pick up wood yesterday that he had cut out in the pasture, and it was hot. So we were both hanging in there. So if Kitty goes to sleep, that's it. I did want to mention one thing that I didn't tell her about, and that she mentioned on the way down here. She has a sister that lives in Canton that went to 2 funerals yesterday. She's getting to that age, just like a lot of us are. And her comment, and I want to quote, and so I want you to tell me what she said. No, go ahead. She said something to the effect of how do people live not knowing where they're going when they die? Is that a fair statement? And of course the answer is, well, they know. They're either going to heaven or they're going to hell. And those that have placed their faith and trust in Jesus Christ are going to be with him forever. But it was encouraging to hear her mention, or to have Kitty tell me that she mentioned that, because generally she doesn't talk about things like that. So Bob ended last week's lesson with a guy named Pilate. Pontius Pilate's his full name. Making a statement to Jesus where he asked Jesus, what is truth? And to understand why he asked that question, we have to go back a little bit. Particularly for those of you that were here or heard the lesson last week, you know that Pilate was the governor of Judea. Of course, the Jews had been defeated by the Romans. They were waiting for a Messiah to come, become their king, and defeat the Romans and anybody else that oppressed them, to give them freedom. And that's one of the reasons they were so frustrated when Jesus comes as the Messiah, not wanting to be the king, not being sent to be the king, not being sent to defeat the Romans or anybody else that was oppressing them. That's why the Jews were so upset. And so we need to go back a little bit and understand the way Rome worked at that time. Rome was in a way a lot like we are getting to be as a country. There was a Caesar who is more powerful than our president, but there was also a Senate who really determined how things were going to go. And after countries were defeated by Rome, they had the greatest military in the world at that time, which some people would say is the same for us. As these countries were defeated, Rome would send a governor to guide them, I guess you would say. And the one thing that Rome would not permit was any sort of rebellions, any sort of riots. And that's where they practiced crucifixion, because that was a way that they could show everybody, if you do wrong, this is what will happen to you. And they generally would leave those they crucified on crosses until all of the birds of prey had eaten them down to the bone. So that's kind of what we were dealing with there. The fear of the Romans was rebellion. And that's because at the time Jesus was alive, approximately 40% of the population of Rome was slaves. And therefore the Roman authorities were very nervous about possible uprisings. And that's the same way Pilate was. And we'll see that as we get in further today. Now, one thing Bob said last week that we should talk about, we should mention at the first of every lesson, is Paul telling you why he wrote the gospel. And it's in chapter 20. I'm not going to say the whole thing. He says, these have been written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name. That's the reason why the Holy Spirit inspired Paul to write his gospel. His was the fourth gospel. Bob also mentioned don't get too involved and obsessive over the fact that the way the different writers of the four Gospels characterize a certain event, such as arresting, crucifixion, all of this, just because they don't go word for word with each other doesn't mean that they all aren't true and correct. They each were inspired by the Holy Spirit to write what they did. And you're looking at the total is what you're looking at as far as trying to understand more about why Jesus did what he did. Here's some context, and I'm not going to do the whole thing, but last week, 29 through 30, Pilate says, remember the Jews had brought Jesus to Pilate, the governor, and he knows pretty much what